The Marcus Hale systemic failure case study, the cold open and conviction in 2017. After 20 years in the system, Marcus Hale was finally released. He had lost everything. But the real crime wasn't the conviction. It was the systemic failure that kept him there. They told him the evidence was airtight. They told him the case was closed. What if I told you that the evidence that would have proven his innocence was already sitting in a police file on day one of his incarceration? This is the story of the single omission. Welcome to Systemic Files. This is the Marcus Hale case study, a breakdown of every tiny, ignored protocol that stole 2 decades of one man's life and allowed the real perpetrator to walk free. The year was 1997. Marcus Hale, 28 years old, was a mid-level manager with a clean record. But in the eyes of the police, he fit a profile. Hale was arrested days after a high-profile robbery and assault case that rocked the city. The state's case was built on a single, fragile pillar: eyewitness identification. The victim, under severe trauma and pressure, picked Hale out of a police lineup. At the time, DNA analysis was barely a factor in state-level courts. What was critical, and what was later deliberately obscured, was the lab report from the scene. They found trace biological material. The forensic analysis returned an inconclusive match. But rather than following protocol and running further tests, the information was simply classified as not relevant. The prosecution had their eyewitness, they had their suspect, and they had the public outcry. Marcus Hale was found guilty. He was sentenced to 20 years. A life erased by 3 words on a dusty report: not relevant. Chapter 2. The appeals and the delay the conviction was in. The appeals began. For Marcus, the walls were concrete, but the real enemy was paper. His defense attorney, Ellen Ward, was overwhelmed and underfunded. She never filed the motion for modern PCR testing, a powerful method that could have definitively isolated the DNA profile. The evidence, that single, crucial fluid stain, sat untouched in an envelope in a storage locker. Year after year, the truth was locked away by bureaucratic inertia. The courts were unmoved. They held firm. The jury had made its decision. The prevailing culture was pushing for a quick, visible win. Once a conviction is secured, the system, the prosecutors, the state, has very little incentive to look back and admit failure. Marcus Hale's name was simply a solved case. Then, 14 years into his sentence, the first crack appeared. A young volunteer from the non-profit Innocence Project stumbled upon the case file. They weren't looking for a mistake. They were just reading the original forensic report. And they saw the failure immediately. Chapter 3, the breakthrough and exoneration. A new motion was filed, not to retry the case, but simply to do what should have been done 20 years prior: run the modern PCR DNA test. The system resisted one last time. It took months of legal maneuvering to persuade the court to simply open an envelope. Finally, the court agreed. After 2 decades, the preserved evidence was pulled from cold storage. The sample was rushed to the lab. The atmosphere was sterile, but the stakes were astronomical. A man's entire life was condensed into a single biological swab. The lab results came back with devastating, absolute clarity. The DNA profile from the fluid stain did not match Marcus Hale. Not even close. It matched another man. That man was already serving time in another state for a shockingly similar crime committed years later. The system had found the correct profile, but only after it had finished destroying an innocent life. On that day, Marcus Hale was free. Conclusion and the systemic lesson: 20 years lost. 2 decades stolen because a single piece of evidence was deemed not relevant. The real lesson of the Marcus Hale case is not a single bad actor, but a system structured to protect its own momentum over the pursuit of truth. The pursuit of a quick win leads to blind spots. And those blind spots can cost innocent people their entire lives. If you found this breakdown valuable, help us keep the systemic files open. Like this video and subscribe to see our deep dive next week into the case of the silent witness. Until then, keep questioning the system.